Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 24 for Sam's, my fundraising initiative to not only raise funds for my branch, my Samaritans branch, but also to raise visibility for what we do. So we're there for our callers 24/7, to be there to listen to them if they're going through life events. They might be feeling suicidal, for example. So these are the things that I want to raise, um, put a spotlight on, which is why I'm doing, 24 sessions in 24 hours today, 24th of September, 24th of July, which is 24/7 in the UK date format time zone. Today we have Safiyyah on, not today, this session we have Safiyyah. She also volunteers. And so we are here to, to talk about, um, being there for our callers and servicing those who actually need our offering. Hi, Safiyyah.
Hiya. Maybe I can start by saying a bit about what I do with volunteering. So I volunteer for an organisation who also offers support for people who are experiencing suicidal thoughts. We're called The Listening Place, and I've been volunteering there for, I think, about 2.5 years. So what we do is kind of slightly different but adjacent to what Samaritans does, and we often signpost to Samaritans when people are in crisis. So what we do is we offer face-to-face support over a series of sessions. So somebody might reach out and be referred by their GP, or they might self-refer. The idea is that they get a call back, ideally within 24 hours, so it's quite quick, but not necessarily immediate in the way Samaritans is. And then following that, the person who does the initial call will book them in for an assessment, and after that they're booked in for a series of 6 sessions with a listening volunteer. So I started off as a listening volunteer. We go through very intense training, which sounds quite similar to what you do at Samaritans. Rightly so, you want to be well prepared for the situation and be able to support people. And then I was a listening volunteer for about 1.5 years, and last year I became a supervising volunteer running a shift. So when you're running the shift, you're looking after visitors indirectly via your listening volunteers, but also supporting the team that you have with you, and kind of being there for a debrief and a check-in after they've had their sessions. So
Oh, really? Is it 24/7 or?
no, it's sort of during the day. The shifts run from 9 till 9, and people get a 45-minute slot within that with their listening volunteer. So I think within the session there are a lot of parallels in terms of what Samaritans does. The It's usually not somebody who's immediately in crisis. At that point, that is usually when we would refer them to Samaritans, or potentially get them to contact their GP or 111. But there are obviously cases where somebody might turn up and in that moment they are in crisis, or perhaps they've rung up because they know who the listening place are and they want to speak to somebody who's familiar.
Is it only is there more than one location?
Yeah, so we're actually opening up a new one. I don't know the exact date, but they're spread out across London. So it started off sort of in the Pimlico area. That's where their first site was, and then they branched out to King's Cross. I worked at the Hammersmith branch, and there's another one due to open in East London. So good coverage across London, but of course, yeah, not
Mm.
everywhere. We're still building up the spaces.
Oh, that sounds quite a lot. Tell me about your own personal journey. What led you to do this?
Well, I guess I've had sort of personal experiences of loss around suicide as well, and I know people who have experienced those thoughts and gone through mental health challenges. So it's always been something I've been interested in learning more about, and especially from like the supporting side of things. So I guess I can't remember exactly how I came about the listening place, but there was an initial sort of assessment. What do you call it? like an intro session, and I thought I'll go to the intro session and find out more. In parallel, I'd done mental health first aid training, and a big portion of that is around talking about suicide and understanding the risk factors and what leads up to people maybe attempting suicide. So, having done the mental health first aid course, then going to the info session, I thought, yeah, this sounds like something I'd like to do. Um, as I mentioned, there's like the training period is quite long and quite intense. So if I remember correctly, I think it might have been like 2 sessions a week over a series of weeks. So you really get immersed in it. We do like role plays. There are some really great trainers who kind of tell you a lot about what the listening place does and prepare you really well. So I think that training is not only for them to prepare us, but also to us to prepare ourselves. And by the end of the training, I was like, yeah, 100%, I would like to do this. So I think it wasn't a straight away, I'd like to do this. It was more, I'm curious, let's find out more, let's see how it goes. And yeah, over the course of the training, it was firmly like, okay, I know what I'm signing up for, and this is something I'd like to do.
Yeah. I just noticed in the comments that my branch director has popped in. Say good morning, Vasanthi. She's really lovely and super supportive and looks after our branch and us as well. It sounds like it's quite similar, listening place and Samaritans. And what have you found was, what's the hardest bit about being a volunteer?
Hmm. I think definitely when I started, I found not solutioning very difficult. I'm
Mm,
a consultant, so usually people expect me to be listening to them in order to solve their problems. And even as a consultant, you need to learn to listen and absorb and reflect before you try and solution afterwards. Which I was probably still learning at that point in my career as well. And I think working at the listening place helped. But yeah, it was the idea of there is no goal to fix anything. I'm not here to fix anybody. I'm not here to solve their problems. I'm just here to listen. Was definitely a new thing for me. So that was, I think, the hardest thing at the beginning. Uh, it took a while, and it was nice to kind of reflect on that in myself because I could kind of take it away and go, okay, this is how I'm feeling. And at the end of my shift, I could talk to my supervisor about it and say, I wanted to say all of this stuff. And it was nice. I think like having that structure of support in the charity means that if you do just want to like say stuff out loud after a session, you can say it. And usually your supervisor will be like, good job not saying it, or maybe you shouldn't think about, like, have you thought about it this way instead, sort of thing. So they do kind of coach you through it, but I definitely found that really challenging because I would spend all day at work listening in order to put together requirements, in order to put together a solution, and that part of it, my brain just had to switch off completely.
mm,
That was cool. It was a good learning experience, I think.
definitely. How long did you start volunteering? So,
I think it's about 2.5 years ago. I actually started at the same time as starting my job at Give Clarity. The stars aligned, and both offices were opening up. Well, Give Clarity had been in Hammersmith already, and TLP were opening a new office in Hammersmith. So it was like perfect timing. I
mm.
started the job, I'd go into the office, and then I could kind of build up my routine in the shift there. So.
How long is your shift?
The shift is, I do the evening shift, or I was doing the evening shift from 5 till 9. And then as a supervisor, you're usually there about 15 to 20 minutes longer,
Mm,
closing up and looking up the building afterwards as well.
mm. Is it a shift every week that you do?
It's every other week. So the way it works for listening volunteers is they have a fortnightly shift, and they would generally see the same visitors each time. So
Mm,
when I start my shift, over the course of that visitor's support with the listening place, I would see them each time. So when I start at 5, then at 5:15 would be the first appointment. I'd see that visitor, and I'd see them again in a fortnight's time at 5:15. So I think that's where it differs slightly from Samaritans in that this is a regular face-to-face appointment, whereas Samaritans, of course, is 24 hours across different channels.
mm. So, do you find that your visitors, um, might create a dependency to see you. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, so a big part of the training is around boundaries and making sure that we establish them not just for the visitor safety, but also for our own. So there is a strong emphasis on that, and that's part of what the supervisors and the wider visitor support team are there to help with the listening volunteers. I think what's really important, and I suspect there's a parallel here, is that it's not me, Safiyyah, offering you support as a visitor. It's the listening place. It's the whole organisation. So I think that is the first step in maintaining a sort of clear boundary, in that yes, we are two individuals sat in the room having a conversation. Ultimately, that's where you build the connection. But if I'm not here one day, there'll be a colleague that will support you, and you'll still have your appointment. If you want to reach the organisation outside of your appointment time, you'll speak to any one of my colleagues. Um, so I think that really helps just build a structure in place so that the visitor is supported by the listening place as a whole. That improves sort of their support network, means that they're safe and protected, as are the listening volunteers as well. Can be hard, I think. Endings can be very difficult for some people
Mm.
on both sides. You know, you've sat in a room and talked about some, like, probably your deepest, darkest secrets, or your fears, or your hopes and dreams. So saying goodbye to somebody at the end of that can be tough, but also it can be really nice. Um,
So if do you keep notes on the, yeah, about what you talked about and how the session went, that sort of thing?
yeah, so we have a CRM. It's a custom CRM, but we do record it, and visitors are informed about all of the note taking and the data protection up front. Um, as a Salesforce consultant, I really liked that bit coming in. I was just like, this is great. Like, people know exactly what's going on. We inform them about data and consent, because, of course, you could be talking about some very sensitive issues. Um, so we take notes. It's all recorded in the system. The volunteers are the ones who can see it, and they can't access it when they're off site as well. So you can only see the notes when you're on shift. You can't access it from home. You can access parts of the database, but not the notes area. And when the visitor is no longer, having appointments with TLP, then those notes are then hidden from any active volunteers, and only certain people can access it. Um, I think actually the note taking is interesting because you learn how to take notes in a very objective way, which again was quite a useful skill when I first started. I hadn't had to do that before. Usually, you can write your notes during scoping and you can say whatever you want because they're your notes. But this is very different. This is like record keeping. This has nothing to do with my opinion and my thoughts. It's just notes so that next time when I speak to the visitor, I could pick up where I left off, or, remember the name of their pet, or remember that it was their kid's birthday 2 weeks ago. That sort of stuff is really helpful to build a connection. I do find that once you've had 2 or 3 sessions with a visitor, you start to remember this stuff anyways. But having the notes is a good option, and it also helps supervisors just check in on how the conversation went, pick up a conversation with their listening volunteer as well, and just kind of make sure that everything is aligned to what we're expected to do.
Mm. How has sorry, you were going to say something.
No, I was going to ask, I guess with Samaritans, if it's like a one-off conversation, do you still take notes or record anything after the calls?
No, so confidentiality is a really, really big part of what we do, and I think that allows callers to actually open up a lot more. We take notes on the call to so that we can have a conversation. So to circle back on the fact that you mentioned that you lost your aunt or uncle, like 20 minutes ago. So, but at the end of it, we shred that info. We use Salesforce, and we log the call. But like you, the information we log is strictly objective. So a name, if they've given a name, and what categories of why they called, maybe a little bit more detail about them. Let's say if they're army vet or they're an NHS nurse, what they call about. Did they mention that they felt suicidal? Are they thoughts? Are they, that is very, like you say, very factual.
Yes.
In the past, before we had the system, it was all like written where we could like write what we wanted. So the shift to this was very interesting for a lot of roles. But it was also important in that we only collected statistics, rather than like the details of the stories. So that was it. That's what we tell the our callers. Notes get destroyed, and information is confidential within Samaritans, because what that also means is that sometimes we have people listening in for quality and safeguarding purposes, and we won't know if that happens. But nothing's recorded, and we don't have phone numbers or anything like that. It's kind of like hidden away and only accessible via, I don't know, court orders or something like that. So um, confidentiality is something that we take quite seriously.
It's interesting. Yeah, I think the confidentiality aspect is the same at TLP. It's like it's confidential within the organisation. At the end of the shift, I'm not going to go home and tell anybody about what I've talked about, and that's, I think, very important for building trust and building a space where somebody feels like they can be listened to.
Mm. Something interesting that started happening is, when people call, the first thing they ask is, "Are you an AI?" Nowadays, um, we do web chat. That almost always they ask, is this a bot or something like that?
Yeah.
But well, I guess it doesn't happen because you're face to face. It's just, yeah, one of those things.
Yeah, that's it. Really, I think that emphasizes the need for human connection. Like that, I think is what a lot of people are looking for in these spaces, and you definitely don't want to be faced with a bot or a long dialing option series before you can actually speak to a human, especially when you're feeling in crisis in that moment.
Yeah, definitely. Have you? So you've been a volunteer for about 2.5 years. Um, how has being a volunteer changed you as a person?
Mm. Definitely that solutioning aspect that we talked about earlier. I think I've learned to kind of park that aspect, probably fed through not just in consulting. I probably am a consultant because I like solutioning rather than the other way around. So, yeah, being able to go, okay, this is a skill that I enjoy, but it's not something I need to apply to absolutely everything, has probably, I think, had huge benefits across my whole life, because I'm listening to my friends better. I'm not trying to solve their problems when they tell me about something. It's the same at home with my family. So, yeah, being able to like say, am I just here to listen, or is somebody asking me for help or advice, and like assessing that situation, asking them, is something that's carried across elsewhere. I think the note taking has actually been really helpful, learning that skill of just write down, what was said, what happened, write down the key bits of information, is something that actually has been useful at work as well. When you're kind of writing about events, sometimes that's quite helpful. So I found that useful. And I think what I've learned, perhaps subconsciously and then more actively when I became a supervisor, was like how to sort of decompress after a shift. So I didn't actively think about it when I first started as a listening volunteer, but I found that I would like tie my hair up at the beginning of a shift, and that to me, like, I quite like having like a physical, this is me starting the shift. Like I do it when I'm at work. I roll up my sleeves, things like that. I was like, I'll tie up my hair, and then at the end of the shift, when I take my hair out, that's kind of me. Like, subconsciously, I think I was like a way to decompress. And then when I started working with other people on a shift, I was quite mindful of making sure that they had a space to decompress, especially because a lot of them were very new. So we had what I called a stand up at the end, where we kind of talked about the shift, something silly as well at the end. So, what's your favourite gig you've been to, or where you're going on holiday next, that sort of thing. So I think I've learned to recognise the need to decompress after a shift and make sure I create some time for that. I think that's been quite helpful across everything in life. I finish work and I'm just like, just take 5 minutes, have a cup of tea, do something. And that little bit of space in between really helps you kind of be at your best in general and look after yourself.
Oh, you just mentioned something that was really interesting that just occurred to me. So, since you've got appointments, what happens if you have someone who shares something very intense and they may not be in a place to take the next appointment? What happens? Do you have somebody to like swap out?
Yeah, this is when there's like a huge team that kind of is available to support. I would say in the first instance, if somebody's disclosed something in their listening appointment with their listening volunteer, maybe saying that they've got a plan to end their life before the next appointment, or they're feeling like they might not be here in the next couple of weeks, then the LV can actually like call their supervisor in the rooms. We've got a buzzer if they really need it, if they feel like they can't step out. Oftentimes they will be able to say to the visitor, I'm just going to go and speak to my supervisor, like, they can manage the situation and just check the person is safe before coming upstairs to get us. We're never very far away. In some cases, they might wait until the end of the session and then kind of bring us in later on. So they're trained to judge that situation. And then we have a team called visitor support. So visitor support work same sort of hours as us, but they're not in appointments. They're on the phones. They're doing that initial call, and they can do check-in calls with the visitor between their appointments. So if somebody is deemed high risk, or we have another stage called imminent risk. Imminent risk is like something is going to happen or is planned to happen soon. Then visitor support will step in and they've got a series of protocols that they can follow. So there are cases where somebody might be contacted between appointments, and that is the listening place as an organisation rather than the visitor, the volunteer themselves.
Oh, okay. All right. So there's a lot more things that go happen at the listening place. Vasanti's asked a question.
Mm.
So do you find any particular subject matters that people want to talk about challenging or triggering, and how do you cope?
Yeah, I find this question. I actually was asked this question in my initial interview. So once you go through training, there's an interview as well to kind of just understand you more as a volunteer. And I was asked a similar question about triggers, and I said, I don't really know what I will find triggering, because I find our brains are really complex, right? I might go, I don't know, I experienced this really traumatic thing, but actually talking about other people experiencing that is really easy for me because I've been through it. Whereas somebody might say something about, I don't know, like a green door, and then suddenly the green door reminds me of this weird experience I've had, and that to me is triggering. So in terms of like preparing for being triggered, I find that really difficult. But that decompressing bit is how I cope. So somebody could say something in the moment, and the training was like really brilliant. It's kind of ongoing in terms of how to cope when you're in the session. I think being able to recognize that the session, you're so there for the visitor that I find over time it becomes easier not to think about how I'm reacting to that. And it's afterwards when I'm going through that decompression that I can go, what did that bring up in me? How did I feel? Do I need to check in with myself? So when I'm actually in the session with the visitor, I don't know what's going to trigger me. It could be a random little thing. But because you're so invested in them, your brain might wander for a second, but just pulling it back to them and being like, in this room, in this conversation, how I feel almost doesn't matter, because I'm going to have that time at the end to check in and reflect. And for now, I just need to focus on the visitor and make sure I'm here for them. So, yeah, your brain might wander, but pull it back and be like, I'm here for this person right now. This is my role. I'm going to have the time, and make sure you find the time to kind of check in with yourself afterwards and have a bit of time to decompress.
Thank you for that. How long is the training and what does that look like?
It's been a while. I think it's been about 3 years since I did the training. I should remember this. The training is also in person, and it's led by a lead trainer, and then they're supported by other volunteers who come in and support, because we do a lot of role plays. So typically the first half, I think each session was 2 hours, because for the first half it would be more like instructions, telling you about things. Almost some of the aspects of it were kind of like mental health first aid training. So talking about like triggers and risk factors, and explaining like how people might have got to the situations that they're in before they get here, and also just understanding things like bias and recognizing the skills that we need in ourselves. So the first hour was kind of general informative training, and then you would always go into a role play. Every single session without fail had a role play. So you'd be put in a group of three. One person would observe while the other two have a conversation, usually with a guided topic. So sometimes you'd be given a prompt. You are so and so. This is what you're feeling right now. This is why you've been referred. And yeah, you just have to do it. Like, I don't really mind. As you can see, I'm quite chatty. So I was like, okay, cool, let's go, let's do it. But it's really weird being observed. And that feedback at first, you're kind of, I hope I did well, but that's irrelevant. The point is to learn. So you get lots of feedback, and that really helps, because it's sort of a group thing, but you're also working in smaller groups. And then by the time you get into a room with a visitor on a real appointment, suddenly you're just like, wow, I can actually just like be here. I don't have a colleague watching me. You do get observed now and again. Like again, for sort of quality and making sure that the LVs have the support they need. But the role plays, I think, were intense, but I can totally see why they work.
How many are at branch at any one time?
Oh, so it varies depending on the shifts. On our shift, on the evening shift at Hammersmith, there were 6 of us, and then you also usually have somebody from visitor support on site as well. On the evening shifts, sometimes there's always at least one on one of the sites that you can contact. And then we also have helping volunteers. So they're the people that greet the visitors, make them feel safe and welcome when they first arrive. They help us kind of coordinate between each appointment. And yeah, most shifts have a helping volunteer. But if I could ask anybody to consider volunteering, I'd say helping volunteers all sorts of volunteers are much needed. And it makes such a big difference on a shift having a big team.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So just going back to training. So part of our training includes things like dealing with misuse, and we have a lot being a free phone line. Is that something you encounter? How do you vet? It sounds like you've got a Vista team. How do you vet to make sure that your guests are genuinely in need and not?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think I wonder if that comes up more with the referrals coming in. So I think visitor support would sort of be like the first line of support, and they maybe see aspects of that. We do have like the organization's approach is, if somebody is feeling suicidal, we don't really say like, how suicidal are you feeling before you get support. If they are experiencing suicidal thoughts, then they get support from us. Sometimes people might want to extend their appointments because they really like having a place to come, and that can be a hard decision. So they might not be experiencing suicidal thoughts anymore, but would still like to continue, and that is ultimately a team decision to make in terms of extending or not. It is difficult, but probably not as high volume as you might get in terms of like callers or people on the chat. How do you deal with those?
So we get training on that. But what's also really good is that when we're logging, we can log to say that it's misused and what kind of misuse, and there are different categories: those that we absolutely don't tolerate, and those that we track, and so on. And the system does it automatically. So if someone from phone number that's been abusing our vault, for example, it, we used to be so tolerant, but now it's they're a bit stricter. Like I I don't know what's the number, maybe 10 in a month. It used
Mm,
to be something like 200 in a month before they actually did something. So
wow.
now it's less, and some of them they don't even give you, if you threaten bodily harm, for example. I believe there is, you get banned for 90 days. They keep reviewing, and what I like to what I've been seeing that I like is that it seems to be, more protection for the volunteers. So in the past, we had to give a lot more leeway, even though, if the person was directly abusing, shouting abuse at us, we still had to like give them three warning, etc. And now, there's less, tolerance for that. So we get training on that. I think uh, a lot of the volunteers said actually the hardest thing is when someone's really chatty and they're just like going round and round, and it's, complaining about a neighbor. Those are a little bit harder to manage. Well, Sophia, thank you so much. We've, had a very, very interesting half an hour. I think I got to learn a lot about the listening place, and, in your volunteer experience. There seems to be a lot of similarities, but also interesting differences that I can see now, and I have a deeper appreciation. I think actually what you do is tougher than what we do.
I don't think you can compare them. They're both very important, and you need slightly different skills in each.
Yeah, I think face to face for me might be just a little bit tougher. But anyway, I'm glad both our organizations exist and both of us are doing good work there. And thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you.
Thank you
Um,
for having me. And
and
thanks for what you're doing today as well.
I know. So I'm hoping to raise money. I think we're halfway to my target of £2,473 and 65p. So that's like 224,735. That was the number I was trying to get to. So I'm halfway there. Hopefully, get a bit more donations. But Safiyyah, thank you so much. I hope to see you again at a meetup soon.
Thanks, Pay. Thanks for having me.